Africa, the continent of Africa, there's right now what is being referred to as a second scramble for Africa. And Africa is essentially under assault from at least three different sources, China being one of them, the United States being another, and a number of rich oil producing in many cases rich oil producing countries and or countries just that have a tremendous amount, an enormous amount of money also as an interested player in this process. And here's what's happening. Clearly, Africa is the last battleground for human resources in the world, whether it's oil, whether it's any of a number of earth minerals, a number of rare minerals, whether it's gold, diamonds, you name it. In terms of natural resources, Africa is clearly the richest continent in the world. There are deposits of natural resources in Africa that are not equaled anywhere else in the world. That's the first thing. So, let us take first the fact that with China as a rising force and power, competing directly with the United States and for energy, and in particular for fossil fuel energy for oil, China is wooing a number of African countries that have known oil reserves, as is the United States, wooing those countries in order to have a stake in those oil resources, because oil, as we know, is a finite resource. At some point, we are going to have a situation in which the Middle East would not be able to sustain the demand for oil at a global level. We already have a relationship with the monarchy in Saudi Arabia, which is many people point out that it's a corrupt relationship, but it is a relationship nonetheless, and that is predicated on U.S. access to Saudi oil. And much of what is happening in the Middle East right now and in other parts of the world, including places like Afghanistan, which are not far away from the Caspian Sea and the Caspian region, where you have vast amounts of natural gas. A lot of that geopolitics is taking place around the competition for resources. China is competing neck and neck with the United States for access to African resources, including oil. And China has the advantage in some cases, in some of those countries, in the following sense, that as a member of the United Nations Security Council, it has veto power. And China does not hold corrupt African dictators accountable on human rights issues. China is prepared to play this game of non-interference in the internal affairs of states. And therefore, it is willing to work with whosoever will work with them, and they don't really care what your internal practices are or how corrupt your government might be. As far as they're concerned, they will work with whoever will work with them, because it is about having access. That's one level. You are quite right. There are a number of cases in which there have been virtual riots in places like Zambia, where the Chinese have not only gone in there and invested in infrastructure, building things like power plants or roads or whatever, in part to satisfy their own need, but in addition to that, they have brought in I don't know about 30,000, but brought in very large contingents of Chinese workers, and it has created a tremendous amount of tension with the local workforce, in part because there is no transfer of know-how or technology between the Chinese and the indigenous population when they bring their own contingent of workers into these African countries. Secondly, the Chinese workers who are brought in there are often put in positions in supervisory positions over the indigenous population, and there are all kinds of cultural tensions that emerge as a result of that. So that's another factor. Then, Africa is also targeted at another level, which is the scramble for land for food, because there are going to be two big crises coming up next in the world. One is going to be the global shortage of fresh water, and the other one is going to be the global shortage of food. There are China is among the countries that are buying vast amounts of land, but also a number of Arab countries which have a lot of foreign reserves. They are also buying vast amounts of land. Private corporations are also buying vast amounts of arable land in African countries to grow food for their particular for their local populations. So we have situations developing in places like Ethiopia. Ethiopia is in the Horn of Africa, where right now they're experiencing the worst drought in 60 years, and tens of thousands of people are dying of famine, and as many as 12 million people are at risk. But Ethiopia is among the countries that have entered into contracts with foreign investors, turning over vast amounts of land for the purpose of growing food to be exported from Ethiopia to those countries which are investing. This is creating a situation that is going to be clearly unsustainable. Among the byproducts of this practice is the displacement of local farmers who are being driven off their land by their own governments, so that land can now be turned over to foreign investors who are purchasing the land to grow food for their local populations. So this is a very complex issue. I have written on this subject on a number, and if you would care to do so, and you want to go to my website, which is talktohugh.com, there's a piece I wrote there about a year ago or more called The Second Scramble for Africa, which addresses this issue in considerable detail and also cites a number of studies and other external sources that you might find useful